Since the dawn of recorded history, mankind has been philosophically captivated by 4 words. Who is best girl? This video will not answer that question, because this is a video about war. Due to the fact they're subjective, the best girl wars are eternal, thus the question of who the ultimate waifu is will never be answered. But if we're never going to find a permanent peace, we might as well settle for a stalemate. Some people's favourite flavour is vanilla, some people's favourite condiment is ketchup, some people's favourite band is the Beatles. What this proves is that sometimes choosing the most basic option is a rational decision made by large swathes of people, but that's not going to stop me from calling them a bunch of boring pricks. A while ago I made a video trying to determine what the most anime-ass anime to ever anime was, which was bold of me to do before having seen Punchline. In that vid, I claimed that the idea of the archetypal anime was going to change. Different genres have become popular or fallen out of fashion since many of the examples I mentioned aired, so they could easily be entirely irrelevant within a few years. With waifus though, that's not up to question. You see, the average waifu consumer has a weird relationship with conformity. You don't say. But this relationship extends to the idea of conformity within the anime fanbase itself. No one wants to be seen as basic, yet popularity is essential in deciding what constitutes as waifu material. Thus, attention spans are short, and the idea of whoever the quote-unquote archetypical waifu is changes based on who's popular at the moment. Now, characters will always have their fans, no matter how old a series is. After all, the most popular female character on my anime list is Kurisu, and Steins Gate is over a decade old. Yet, Steins Gate isn't as popular as it used to be, so the average person might not immediately equate her with the concept of waifus, even if one could look at her design and go, oh yeah, she belongs on a body pillow. And that body pillow belongs in a biohazard containment zone. Though actually, all the characters I'm going to be talking about today double down on this, since there is something intrinsically anime about them, in their design, but also in their personality. This is why I won't be mentioning the second most popular female character according to my anime list, which is Mikasa, as her personality and design are perfect for a serious show like Attack on Titan and its universe, but it doesn't really inspire much in terms of moe, which, in fairness, it really shouldn't. Shows about teenagers being forced to wage war against giant invaders, which develops into fighting with apocalyptic stakes, really shouldn't be able to produce a candidate for the default waifu. It should produce 2 of them. The question of who best girl in Evangelion is will never be settled, but due to how prolific it is, we've reached a state where the 2 main belligerents are prolific enough that one cannot overshadow the other, and both remain recognizable to this day. Misato may have had a bit of a resurgence as of late, and Mari is always there for people who unironically choose the thimble when they play Monopoly. But the sheer influence these 2 have had will make them relevant to the end of time, especially given that trying to buy an anime figure of them will fetch a price higher than a UK driving test. Blue team up first. Rei was one of the most important figures in the development of moe. As the prototypical kudere, she acts otherworldly, emphasizing the rare moments of warm humanity that make such an archetype popular. This smile may have single-handedly exacerbated the developed world's birth rate crisis. Where Rei plays a role in influencing the evolution of modern waifus, Asuka plays a much more active role as a participant in the waifu wars. As a character who is much more involved with Shinji throughout the series, the romantic side, romantic with heavy quotation marks there, has a greater chance to get showcased. Add on to this her design, which has the twin tails that became standard issue kit for a lot of tsunderes going forward. If I had to pick one to be the default waifu candidate, while Rei's influence became evident, I will say that as an individual character, Asuka will always fit the description of a waifu closer. Cards on table, on average I do prefer a kudere to a tsundere, but I can't deny that tsunderes are a more popular trope than kuderes. On top of this, the most recent polling both in Japan and internationally indicates that Asuka is the most popular. Every era of waifu warfare since Evangelion has had a notable tsundere define it. Even the previous contenders for the archetypical waifu in their respective eras have been characters like Haruhi, Taiga, Kirino, and Rin, all of whom were tsunderes. However, the previous 3 aren't as recognizable anymore, and the latter was drowned out by the sheer number of characters that came from the other Fate media. Asuka remains the most influential tsundere of all time. Imagine her as the waifu equivalent of the AK-47. Incredibly versatile, widely adopted, and often iterated. But she was not the first of her kind. Tsundere is such a widely popular character type that Microsoft Word doesn't even spell check it, and it goes back way earlier than 1995. To find the STG-44 to this AK-47, we must consider who the Hugo Schmeiser of moe is, and it could be none other than Rumiko Takahashi. She is one of the most influential mangaka in history, and her greatest contribution to the wider waifu scene is none other than Lum. I'm no Urusei Yatsura expert, having only seen the first episode of the reboot, but even I know how big of a deal real she was. There's a really interesting article by Chris Kincaid about this, and I'll link that in the description. But not only was she the first proper tsundere, with earlier prototypes now being made into one codified model, but she'd also served as the progenitor of Moe, whose effects are felt after she herself faded to a memory of yesteryear. One thing that speaks to this is that she had a standard Moe tick, which was calling protagonist Otaru darling, something that was revived in the modern era with the second character we're talking about, 02. Going back to my earlier metaphor, 02 is the M16 of waifus, based off the design of the STG, and it's in the process of being phased out, yet it still remains iconic of its era. Another thing that the two have in common is that their initial deployment was a fucking shit show. Darling in the Franxx is a show that got very popular in one of the best seasons of new anime I have seen since I started watching seasonal anime, but then it almost brought down the entire reputation of two studios with it. Yet by that point, 02 was so ingrained that she had become popular enough to be name-dropped by massive celebrities, like Western celebrities of all people. I partially attribute this popularity due to her being lucky enough to get popular around the same time the word thick was reaching mainstream parlance, which, coupled with some of the classic Lum-esque charm, you really had a recipe to leave behind a legacy of many people participating in their first ever best girl debate thanks to her. What do I think of her? Absolute normie tier garbage. This is probably my inner anime elitist talking, but I've every right to be cynical about her, given how inescapable she was at the time. And it's reflected today with the ample surplus of her merch still lying around long after the fact. I remember about 5 years ago, which, bear in mind, is still long after Darling in the Franxx stopped airing, I passed a car that was parked in the driveway of a fairly decent looking house. Now, I'm guessing some of you know what itaishas are, cars that are fully decked out in anime girl art. The name itself stems from how painfully devoted the drivers are to their 2D wife. Well, this car is like what an itaisha would be if it was designed by someone who barely watched anime, because it consisted of a Demon Slayer decal, a Dragon Ball over the petrol cap, but most tellingly of all, a bumper sticker of 02. But the most embarrassing thing in this story was, predictably, myself, because I didn't immediately recognize who that character on the bumper sticker was. So my immediate thoughts were, oh my god, is that Moe Calliope? Now you gotta cut me some slack for forgetting 02, because as much of an impact as she left, she was only a safe contender for the default waifu for about a year. At which point, a different pink-haired anime girl known by TikTokers for a quirky dance became popular. And this time, the dance was actually original and not stolen from Me. Chika Fujiwara is an odd case because, in theory, she should not be as popular as she is. Most girls from shows where the title of Best Girl has tight competition don't tend to be that recognizable in the long run, since they risk being overshadowed by another character. However, that doesn't matter to Chika, because the Chika people recognize is not the character in Kaguya-sama, because then we'd be comparing her as a candidate for Best Girl alongside Hayasaka, Kaguya, and Shirogane's dad. But Chika has a loophole, because who she is in the show itself doesn't matter, as the Chika most people know is the girl from that one quirky dance. So the less you know about the show she's from, the more likely she is to represent waifus for you. When completely detached from context, she is at her most spreadable. And nothing is more spreadable than that dance and this single image. Art historians are going to come back to this picture because it is a distillation of the philosophy behind waifuism. You have a literally me character looking serious, a representation of the anime viewer's idealized view of themselves, and then you have the Asian cartoon character standing next to them in a terrible clash of styles, yet photoshopped in a way where you could just about believe that this is the moment that actually happened, and your mind has pieced together how this is truly a real love. In brief, it's fucking delusional. Why'd you think I embrace it wholesale? One of the most generation-defining best girl skirmishes is Re:Zero, because if I'd asked you to choose the most stereotypical waifu 7 years ago, you would have answered Rem in a heartbeat, even if you hadn't watched Re:Zero. Maid outfit, unquestionable devotion, Inori Minase as her seiyuu. She had all she needed to dominate the waifu scene in the mid to late 2010s. She remains to this day the third most popular female character according to MAL, and this is probably the most mainstream maid you can think of in an anime. She is also proof that the best girl wars transcend even the protagonist's choice. While she got rejected by Subaru, which, let's be real, the writing was on the wall for that one, everyone else was still willing to choose her. After the first season ended, the buzz for Rem was still riding high, and this buzz even transcended to a heavy dislike of Emilia, despite her doing basically nothing in that first season. While she may have lost the battle for Subaru's heart, Rem had won the waifu war of Re:Zero. Then something surprising happened. With Rem now comatose, everyone started to warm up to the idea that previously disgraced candidate Emilia might be ReZero's best girl. It was hushed whispers at first, but now that Rem's been out of the show for longer than she's been in it, and Emilia has been given some more moments to act cute in, it's almost an accepted fact. Ram also helped fill the void, since she is just a palette swap of Rem, but I think Emilia's comeback is the more surprising development, given that everyone had forgotten about Rem both in the show and IRL. Emilia has consolidated the throne of best girl so well that even within the show she's called a waifu. Or at least the people who are writing the subs over at Crunchyroll do. Seriously, this is fucking embarrassing. All of this could change if Rem ever gets reawakened, but now I think we're in a different era. Elf girls have been eating well over the past few years, so Rem will now have much stiffer competition compared to the cakewalk she had back in 2016. Consider also that Emilia is voiced by Rie Takahashi, who voiced the fourth most popular female character according to MAL, Megumin. Actually, brief side tangent. While I feel that Megumin's appeal is a little too niche to be considered universally popular, the fact she's still going strong all these years later is proof of something. Konosuba has other girls, but they fail to hold a candle to Megumin's popularity, because as they say in Italy, ravioli, penne fettuccini, we love lolly, Teddy Kaczynski. Megumin love is more of a subcultural thing, but I feel it's given her a cult of personality that's meant she's always stuck around in global waifu recognition ever since 2016. Not only is Megumin so popular that this image may single-handedly end the developed world's birth rate crisis, but she was popular enough to get her own spin-off light novel adapted, which is rare for side projects. That anime even had some great moments, like how there was a particularly funny bit where Megumin murders an adorably pathetic duck in one of the most hilarious bits of poultry strangulation I've ever seen in anime. So speaking of chicken choking, Marin is easily the most relevant character in this video at time of recording, being from the most high-profile series with ecchi elements in recent memory. But I think there is a surprising amount of metagaming that's put Marin in such a popular position. She's a gyaru, so she's got a niche, and one that's been fairly underserved until recently. Add on to this, she's a massive otaku, which naturally strikes a chord with an otaku audience. Yet it's the cosplayer angle that means she's infinitely exploitable by fan artists, as they aren't limited to just one design. But every good military campaign is subject to timing, and My Dress Up Darling chose perfectly. It came out after two other high-profile waifus got their adaptations in the form of Komi-san and Nagatoro, the former of which is fantastic, and the latter of which you'll probably enjoy if you're one of those folks who have no problems in their life. By coming out after these two, Marin had breathing room, as well as something those other two didn't: a lack of expectations. Everyone had read the manga for Komi-san and to a lesser extent Nagatoro, and so their respective anime adaptations were not everyone's main exposure to the character. That's why Komi-san hit a peak of popularity before the anime even came out. In contrast, hype around Marin was all neatly concentrated around the anime. Then, even after it ended, people were still on about her because there just wasn't anything around to eclipse her. If you want an example of her staying power, then just look at the sequel series. While Ruri Rocks was painstakingly explaining the extraction of minerals so precious it's hard to believe they are off this earth, My Dress Up Darling was out here mining an even more elusive resource: the female orgasm. So now that I've gone over the players, I must make one last note on the game. These are the girls who serve as the stereotype of waifus to the broader public, at least for now. By this time in 3 years, I reckon half of them will be but a memory of the unending best girl wars. However, every era needs its symbols. It had to be someone you were completely sick to death of seeing, as you cursed them for being just another overexposed fad. You may have indeed been right, but all these years later, someone still draws fan art of them. The goods still fetch a high price, and what was once normie slop is now an acquired taste that you kids just wouldn't get. They are the most boring choices, but they were popular for a reason. So if you consider one of them to be best girl, that doesn't necessarily mean that your taste is vanilla. It would be if your favourite was her, though.